The cold autumn wind swept through the playground, chasing leaves across the cracked asphalt like little rust-colored ghosts. Children's laughter echoed through the air, bright, high-pitched sounds that tumbled and collided like marbles. But Tommy Matthews heard none of it. He sat alone on the far edge of the yard, where the noise of the world couldn't reach him, where the only rhythm that existed was the steady rise and fall of his breath and the slow dance of leaves beneath his small hands. His coat was the kind that cost more than some parents' cars. Soft wool, hand-stitched, his name embroidered on the inside lining. Yet even wrapped in such luxury, Tommy seemed adrift in another world. His wide blue eyes followed the children who ran and shouted, but not with envy. It was something quieter, more fragile, a kind of aching curiosity, like he was watching life through glass, close enough to touch, but forever out of reach. Teachers watched him too, from the edge of the playground, exchanging glances thick with pity. They smiled when he looked their way, but it was a nervous sort of smile, one that carried more helplessness than warmth. Mrs. Wilson, the kindergarten assistant, clutched her clipboard and sighed. "Poor little thing," she murmured to another teacher. "Still won't talk to anyone. Talk." The word felt cruel if she had known how deep it cut. The wind picked up, sweeping Tommy's fine brown hair across his forehead. He brushed it back absently, eyes lowering to the ground. With a stick, he traced loops and swirls in the layer of golden leaves beside him. The patterns had no meaning, just movement, a small rebellion against stillness. That's when he saw her. A girl with a frayed ponytail and a jacket 2 sizes too big stood a few yards away, watching him with the same wide-eyed curiosity he felt for everyone else. Unlike the other children, she didn't whisper or giggle or look away. She simply stared, steady and kind, as if she saw something the rest of the world had missed. Emma Parker hesitated for a moment, then began to walk toward him. Her sneakers crunched over the leaves, the sound invisible to him but loud enough to make a few children turn. They watched her, whispering behind cupped hands, "She's going to the weird boy." Emma didn't care. When she reached him, she didn't speak. She crouched so that their eyes met. The wind caught the strands of her hair and pulled them into the sunlight. Tommy blinked, uncertain, his small fingers pausing over the ground. Then she raised her hands. Her movements were hesitant at first, the signs clumsy but clear enough. Hello. She spelled it slowly, each letter trembling a little. Then me-a-n-a-m-e-a-m-m-a. Tommy froze. For a heartbeat, nothing existed except the space between them, the air vibrating with meaning. Then his eyes widened and tears welled so suddenly they blurred everything into light. His lips parted in a silent gasp as his trembling hands lifted, almost involuntarily. He answered, "You can talk to me." He signed, his motions fluid and sure, as if his fingers remembered what his voice could not. Emma grinned, her eyes shining. Her own hands moved again, slower, careful not to break the fragile bridge they'd built. "I'm learning," she signed back. "For my mom. She gets too tired to talk sometimes." Tommy's tears fell freely now, tracing pale lines down his cheeks. He wiped them clumsily with his sleeve, a gesture too ordinary, too human to belong to the world of billionaires and bodyguards. His fingers moved again, fast and eager. "No one at school talks to me. They just point." Across the playground, Mrs. Wilson froze mid-step. Her breath caught as she watched the boy she'd only ever seen silent now, communicating in bursts of life and movement. She fumbled for her phone, tears pricking her eyes as she whispered, "He's signing. He's actually signing." The other teachers turned. The laughter of children seemed to fade into background static, replaced by the soft miracle unfolding before them. A conversation made of hands and hope. Far beyond the chain-link fence, a sleek black Mercedes idled quietly. Behind tinted glass, a man in a tailored suit watched through the camera lens of his phone. His gloved finger trembled slightly as he pressed record. "Sir," he said into his earpiece, voice low, "you'll want to see this. The Matthews boy is communicating." Inside the car, the faint reflection of the playground shimmered across the window, 2 small figures in the golden light, their hands dancing in silent language, the first fragile chords of a friendship that would change everything. The video played on a massive screen in a room so silent, it could have been a tomb. Jonathan Matthews leaned forward in his leather chair, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the footage captured from the black Mercedes parked by Westfield Elementary's fence. The image trembled slightly from the wind. Two small figures beneath the oak tree, one with golden hair, the other with his son's unmistakable stillness. He watched as the girl raised her hands, slow and uncertain. The boy responded, his movements alive, his face illuminated. For a moment, the billionaire forgot to breathe. He replayed the footage, again and again, 10 times, maybe more. Every repetition etched a deeper ache into his chest. The boy in the video was not the ghost that haunted the halls of his house. This child was alive, his eyes bright, his gestures fluid, his mouth trembling with unsaid laughter. Jonathan pressed pause, the image freezing mid-motion. His son's hands hovered mid-air, forming a word he hadn't seen in years. Friend. Who is she? He whispered. His assistant, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s named Mara Linton, shifted uneasily beside him. Emma Parker, she said, 7 years old. Lives with her parents in the Elmwood apartments on the east side. Mother Sarah Parker has stage 4 lymphoma. Father works multiple jobs. Family income below the poverty line. Jonathan's gaze flicked to her, cold and calculating. And she knows sign language? Basic conversational level. Self-taught, apparently, to communicate with her mother when she's too weak to speak. He leaned back in his chair, the creak of leather loud in the still room. The massive windows behind him overlooked the city, a kingdom of glass and steel that bore his name. To everyone else, Jonathan Matthews was a genius, a titan, the man who could bend the market with a sentence. But here in the quiet, he was only a father staring at something he couldn't buy. Connection. Get me everything on her family, he said at last. Medical records, financial history, employment, school reports, everything. Mara hesitated. Sir, the Parkers are good people. There's no sign of everything, he repeated, his voice slicing through her protest. And keep it discreet. No contact until I say so. Outside, the wind howled against the glass, scattering leaves across the balcony like shattered gold. Across town, the Parker apartment hummed with the low, steady rhythm of a machine. The living room had become a hospital. IV stands by the couch. A small oxygen monitor blinking faintly on the nightstand. Sarah Parker lay beneath a quilt, her face pale, her once auburn hair hidden beneath a silk scarf patterned with faded sunflowers. Emma sat beside her, knees tucked under her chin, recounting every moment of the day in breathless excitement. He smiled, Mommy. He really smiled. His name's Tommy, and he showed me how to sign car and happy and friend. He's so good at it. He talks with his hands faster than I can think. Sarah's lips curved into a tired but genuine smile. Her voice was a whisper, soft and frayed at the edges. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Maybe he needed someone to listen in a way words can't. Emma's eyes brightened. That's what you always say. That everyone talks different if we learn how to listen. That's right, her mother breathed. Sometimes the quietest people have the loudest hearts. A cough racked her frail body and Emma rushed to steady her, small hands trembling. On the counter, the microwave beeped. Dinner ready. Her father wasn't home yet. He wouldn't be for hours. From the shadows near the window, a camera lens clicked silently. A man in a dark coat adjusted the focus, capturing the image of a frail mother, a devoted daughter, and a life held together by love and exhaustion. He didn't linger. One last click, then he slipped out into the night, vanishing into the drizzle-slick streets. By the time Mark Parker arrived home, the air smelled of reheated soup and lavender air freshener. He set down his toolbox, exhaustion hanging off him like a second skin. Daddy, Emma chirped. I made a friend today. He smiled wearily, loosening his work gloves. That so? What's his name? Tommy. He can't hear or talk, but he talks with his hands. Like Mommy. Mark froze mid-motion. The name stirred something. He'd seen it in the papers, connected to wealth, to a corporate empire that seemed to live in another universe. Tommy Matthews? He asked slowly. Emma nodded. He's really nice. He has a coat like the ones in the mall windows. Mark's smile faltered, replaced by a frown of worry. He said nothing more, just brushed his daughter's hair back from her face and kissed her forehead. That's good, sweetheart. But let's keep things simple, all right? School friends, that's all. Later that night, when the apartment was asleep, headlights flashed across the curtains. Mark went to the window and peered out. A car sat idling by the curb, black, tinted, far too clean for this part of town. When he blinked, it rolled away without a sound. He stood there long after it was gone. unease prickling at the back of his neck. In his mansion miles away, Jonathan Matthews watched a new video feed on his phone. The Parkers' apartment captured from across the street. On the screen, a girl laughed beside her sick mother, signing words he couldn't understand but suddenly needed to. He turned the volume up, though there was no sound. Just hands moving in the language of the boy he'd failed to reach. For the first time in years, Jonathan Matthews felt something close to fear. Not of losing control, but of what he might uncover if he finally learned how to listen. The morning light spilled through the high windows of the Matthews estate like liquid gold, catching on the edges of marble floors and mirrored hallways. The house was vast, too vast for a boy of 4, and the quiet that clung to him. Every sound, every clatter of a dish, every whisper between staff seemed to evaporate before it reached him. Tommy walked beside Emma, his small hand curled loosely around hers. It was her first time inside a place so enormous that her footsteps echoed back at her. The walls were lined with paintings she couldn't name, faces of people staring down with eyes that seemed to follow her. A maid passed them, smiling nervously, as if uncertain what to make of the little girl in the second-hand shoes and patched jacket, walking beside the billionaire's son. Jonathan Matthews stood at the top of the staircase, watching them descend. He'd made this meeting official, mediated by the school's counselor to ensure propriety. Still, something about the sight struck him harder than he expected. His son's shoulders weren't slumped as usual. His eyes, usually distant, were alive, focused entirely on the girl tugging him along. "Emma," Jonathan said, descending halfway. "Thank you for coming. I hope you'll make yourself comfortable here." She looked up, intimidated for the first time. "Yes, sir. Thank you for inviting me." Her voice was small but steady, and for a moment, Jonathan saw what had reached his son when all the doctors, therapists, and machines had failed. An unassuming child with the gift of sincerity. Tommy tugged her hand, motioning toward a door down the hall. "Playroom," he signed. They disappeared inside, leaving Jonathan alone with the echo of their footsteps. The playroom was nothing like the rest of the house. It was a world built for one child who never used it. Shelves of untouched toys, books with spines uncracked, a train set that gleamed from disuse. But the room's brightness couldn't disguise its emptiness. Tommy moved to a low table scattered with crayons and blank pages. He motioned for Emma to sit. She did, taking in everything, the expensive toys that looked lonelier than happy children. "You don't play here?" she signed. He shook his head. "Not before," she grinned. "Then we start now." They drew together. Emma sketching clumsy stick figures, Tommy tracing sleek lines that surprised her with their precision. His drawings had a kind of focus that made her forget his age. One picture caught her attention, a car. Not a toy car, but a sleek black vehicle skidding across a jagged line. "What's that?" she asked softly. He didn't answer, his hands pausing midair. His expression changed, something tight, shadowed, old. He set the crayon down and pushed another paper toward her. On it was a smaller figure. His mother, she realized instinctively. Her hair long, her scarf billowing. Emma looked up at him, uncertain. "Is that your mom?" He nodded. There was a moment of silence so thick it almost hummed. Then Tommy reached under the table, fingers searching the underside until he found a small latch she hadn't noticed. He pressed it. A hidden drawer slid open with a soft click. Inside lay a thin tablet covered in dust, its screen faintly cracked. He lifted it out carefully like it was something sacred. Emma leaned closer. The tablet came alive at his touch, the screen flickering before settling on a locked folder titled EM. "EM," she whispered. Tommy nodded again. He tapped in a code with surprising precision. 4 quick strokes. The folder opened to reveal drawings, photos, and a few short videos. The first was a sketch, his mother's handwriting across the top. Testing reports. Do not delete. Beneath it were diagrams Emma couldn't understand, all labeled with strings of numbers and the logo of Matthews Innovations, the same emblem that gleamed above the mansion's front gate. Tommy swiped to another image, this one a photo of his mother standing beside a car identical to the one in his drawing. Her smile was wide, but her eyes looked wary. Emma could almost feel the tension in the picture, like something beneath the surface was about to break. He switched again, this time to a short video. The image was grainy, recorded from a phone. His mother's voice came through faintly. soft, urgent, filled with fear. "John, if you're seeing this, it means they found out," she whispered. "The project isn't what you think. The test data, someone's falsifying the reports. You have to stop it before—" The video cut off with a burst of static. Emma sat frozen, heart thudding. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough to know this wasn't meant to be hidden under a playroom table. Tommy's hands trembled. "She wanted to tell Dad." "Tell him what?" Emma asked. He looked at her, eyes dark with something too heavy for a child. "About the car. About the accident." The door opened suddenly and both children startled. Jonathan Matthews stood in the doorway, the faintest shadow of confusion crossing his face. "What are you two up to?" he asked lightly, but there was an edge beneath his tone. An instinct that something was wrong. Emma instinctively slid the tablet toward Tommy, who covered it with a paper. "Drawing," she said quickly. "Tommy's really good at it." Jonathan smiled faintly, stepping closer. "Yes, he is." He looked at his son, then at the papers. "I didn't know you liked cars that much." Tommy didn't move. He just stared at his father with those same clear blue eyes that once belonged to his wife. Jonathan reached out, resting a hand on his son's head. "I'll let you two get back to it." When he turned and left, closing the door behind him, Tommy's shoulders dropped. His small hand reached for Emma's, gripping tightly. "Don't tell him yet," he signed. "He doesn't know everything." Emma nodded, her pulse quickening. "Okay, but Tommy, what does he need to know?" He hesitated, then signed slowly, each word deliberate. That the accident wasn't an accident. The rain had returned, thin and silver, drawing crooked paths down the classroom window. Emma sat at her desk, her pencil hovering over the page, but she wasn't really writing. Her mind kept looping back to the tablet hidden beneath Tommy's bed. The flicker of his mother's frightened face. The unfinished warning. The way Tommy's hands had trembled when he signed it wasn't an accident. She hadn't told anyone. Not her teacher. Not even her mom. The secret sat inside her like a small, burning coal she couldn't put out or swallow. Tommy was quiet that morning, quieter than usual. When their eyes met across the classroom, he signed just one word. Later. At recess, he didn't go to the swings or the sand pit. He stood near the oak tree waiting. When she joined him, his signs came fast, anxious. Dad asked questions. About the drawings. About the car. Emma bit her lip. Did he find it? No, but he's looking now. His hands hesitated. I'm scared. She reached for his hand the way she did when he froze. Maybe he's just trying to understand. Tommy shook his head fiercely. If he knows, he'll be sad. Mom said he didn't see what was coming. His words haunted her the rest of the day. By the time Emma got home, the apartment felt smaller than usual. The smell of soup lingered in the air, but the sound of her mother's voice was missing. Sarah was asleep on the couch, the faint hiss of oxygen whispering beside her. Her skin was the color of parchment, her chest rising too slowly beneath the blanket. Emma set down her backpack and stood watching for a moment. Her father's note was taped to the fridge. Late shift again. Be good. Heat dinner. She sat on the floor beside the couch, opening her homework but not reading it. Her mother stirred, half awake. Hey, baby, she murmured. How was your day? Emma hesitated. It was good. Sarah smiled faintly, eyes still closed. Did you see your friend? Yes. And he's doing okay? Emma nodded, then signed a few words automatically. He's okay. Just scared. Her mother's eyes opened at that. Scared of what? Emma froze. The words she wanted to say tangled inside her. She could see the tablet in her mind, the fear in Tommy's small hands, but how could she tell her mother, who could barely breathe, that she was keeping a secret that might break someone's heart? Nothing, she whispered. Just nightmares. Sarah studied her face for a moment, but she was too tired to press. Then you tell him he's not alone, okay? No one's ever really alone. Emma nodded quickly, blinking back tears. I will. 2 nights later, the knock came. It was soft, polite, almost hesitant. Mark opened the door to find Jonathan Matthews standing in the dim hallway, rain glistening on his coat. Mr. Matthews. Mark's voice was cautious. Did something happen at the school? No, Jonathan said, managing a thin smile. Nothing bad, I wanted to thank your daughter. She's helped my son more than anyone else has been able to. Mark stepped aside reluctantly, gesturing him in. The sight of the billionaire inside their cramped living room felt like something out of a dream, or a warning. Sarah tried to rise when she saw him, but Jonathan quickly waved her back. "Please don't get up." Her voice was soft but steady. "I didn't expect you here, Mr. Matthews." He looked around, taking in the medicine bottles, the soft flicker of the TV, the quiet hum of machinery. "I wanted to meet the people who raised a girl like Emma," he said. "You've done something extraordinary," Sarah smiled faintly. "We just tried to teach her that kindness isn't extra. It's the base of everything." Jonathan's expression faltered. "That's something I forgot, I think." The conversation stayed polite, almost fragile. Emma stood in the doorway watching the two fathers, one exhausted and worn, the other powerful and lost, sharing a space that didn't belong to either of them. When Jonathan left, he crouched in front of Emma. "You've given my son something priceless," he said quietly. "If you ever need anything at all, you come to me." Emma nodded, but her stomach twisted, because what she needed most, she couldn't ask for. That night she dreamed of the video. Her small hands replayed the movement of Tommy's mother's lips, words she didn't understand blurred by static. She woke with a gasp, heart pounding. The next morning, Tommy wasn't at school. By lunchtime, the teachers whispered among themselves. The Matthews driver had arrived early, collected him without explanation. Emma stared at the empty chair beside her desk, panic creeping in like a slow tide. She thought about the tablet, the message, the look on Jonathan's face when he'd thanked her. That evening, she tried to focus on her mother's soft breathing, on the steady rhythm of the oxygen machine, but her hands wouldn't stay still. They kept signing words into the dim air. "Where are you? Are you okay?" No answer came. She stood at the window long after her father came home, watching the rain blur the streetlights into streaks of gold. Somewhere across town, in that silent house of marble and glass, a boy who couldn't hear might be trying to tell the truth no one else was ready to see, and she was the only one who had heard him. The world felt different after Tommy disappeared for 2 days. When he finally returned to school, he looked smaller somehow, like the weight of something invisible had bent him inward. His usually neat hair was uncombed and dark shadows bruised the skin beneath his eyes. The teachers greeted him softly, too softly, like someone recovering from an illness or a storm. He didn't look at anyone except Emma. She had waited for him by the classroom door, the same way she had that first day on the playground. When their eyes met, relief flooded her face. She signed, "Are you okay?" He hesitated, his fingers trembling slightly. "Dad knows about the tablet." Emma's heart thudded. "What did he say?" Tommy's hands paused midair, his expression unreadable. "He's angry, but not at me. At himself." Before she could ask more, Miss Burnett called them inside, and the moment snapped like a twig. Throughout the morning, Emma kept glancing sideways, trying to catch his eye. But Tommy had retreated back into his silence, his gaze fixed on the window. Following the leaves tumbling past, something had changed in him, something fragile and frightened. That afternoon, as Emma waited for her father by the school gates, a familiar car pulled up, the black sedan with tinted windows. Jonathan Matthews stepped out, his expression unusually soft. "Emma," he said, his voice low, careful, almost unsure of itself. "Could I have a moment?" She nodded warily. He crouched so his eyes met hers. "You're a very brave girl. You've helped Tommy in ways I didn't think possible." Emma fidgeted with the strap of her backpack. "He's my friend." "I know," Jonathan said. "He's told me something." "About what you found." Emma's breath caught. "The drawings?" Jonathan nodded slowly. "And the video." Her stomach flipped. "I didn't mean to." "It's all right," he interrupted gently. "You did nothing wrong. But there are things about that night I never wanted him to remember." He looked away for a moment, rain dripping from his dark hair, his jaw tightening as though he were holding something back. "Sometimes," he said finally, "the truth doesn't heal. It reopens the wound." Emma wanted to ask what he meant, but her father's car pulled up then, headlights flashing. Jonathan stood and offered a strained smile. "Take care of your mother, Emma." The words were simple, but there was something behind them, something heavy, like an unspoken apology. That night, Emma sat at the edge of her mother's bed, the soft glow of the lamp painting gold circles on the wall. Sarah was weaker now. Her breathing came in shallow pulls, and her eyes fluttered open only when Emma signed slowly. "How are you feeling?" Sarah smiled faintly. tired but happy. You seem far away, sweetie. What's wrong? Emma hesitated. She wanted to tell her everything and about Tommy, about the secret, about the sadness in Mr. Matthews' eyes. But the words tangled. I just think grown-ups have too many secrets. Sarah's thin hand brushed her daughter's cheek. Sometimes adults keep secrets because they're scared, not because they want to lie. It's easier to build walls than to face what hurts. Emma blinked back tears. But if you hide behind walls, how can anyone help you? Sarah's hand stilled on her daughter's hair. Sometimes, sweetheart, the walls are the only thing holding you up. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. At the Matthews estate, Jonathan sat in his office surrounded by the hum of machines and the faint hiss of rain against glass. The tablet lay on his desk, the cracked screen frozen on his late wife's image. Her face, pale, determined, tearful, stared back at him. He'd watched it 100 times now. Her lips moved, but the final words always broke apart in static before he could read them. He had spent years burying that night under work, wealth, and denial. But now his son had found a way to dig it up again, through a little girl with kind eyes and a stubborn heart. He closed the tablet and pressed his fingers to his temple. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar, fear not of loss but of truth. Days blurred together. Tommy stopped signing in class. Emma stopped smiling. The teachers whispered that the children had grown distant, that maybe the novelty of friendship had worn off. But they didn't see the way Tommy's gaze followed Emma, or the way she lingered by his desk, waiting for a sign that never came. Finally, one afternoon, as the sky turned the color of bruised copper, Tommy slipped a folded note into her backpack. When she opened it that night, it wasn't written in words. It was a series of hand-drawn signs. Help me tell him. She didn't sleep after that. The next day, she convinced her father to drop her at the Matthews estate under the pretense of returning a forgotten book. The house loomed over her in silent, vast, and echoing. Inside, she found Jonathan in the library, his face drawn, his hands clasped around a photo of his wife. Emma, he said softly, as if he'd been expecting her. She took a deep breath. Tommy wants to tell you something. But he's afraid. Jonathan's expression shifted. Afraid of me? No, Emma whispered. Afraid you won't listen. He looked away, his throat tightening. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he said, almost to himself, You're right. I haven't listened to anyone in a very long time. When he finally turned toward her, there was a question in his eyes, one he hadn't dared to ask anyone since his wife's death. Will you help me understand him? Emma nodded. That's what friends do. Outside, the storm deepened, wind howling across the estate like a warning. Somewhere upstairs, Tommy watched through the stair railing, heart hammering, uncertain whether what was coming next would save them or break them all over again. The air inside the Matthews estate was unusually still, as if the house itself were holding its breath. A low light poured in through the tall windows, catching in the dust motes that drifted like pale ghosts through the study. Jonathan sat on the sofa beside his son, his body tense but his face careful, composed. A man used to controlling every variable but now faced with something unpredictable, a child's truth. Emma sat opposite them, small hands folded in her lap, waiting. Tommy's fingers moved slowly, hesitant. I remember the car, he signed. Jonathan's heart lurched. For 4 years he'd waited for those words and dreaded them. It's all right, he said softly. Take your time. The boy's hands began to shape the air again. We were going fast. Mom was laughing, then she stopped. She turned to me. His eyes shimmered. She said, Tell Daddy to slow down. Jonathan's breath caught. There was rain, Tommy continued, his movements shaky now. Lights, loud lights. Then, he swallowed hard, his chest rising and falling. Then nothing. He dropped his hands to his lap and stared at the floor. Jonathan's fingers trembled against his knees. The image bloomed in his mind. Headlights smeared by rain, his wife's voice faint through the storm, the phone buzzing in the console. A call he shouldn't have taken, a distraction that had cost everything. For years he had buried the memory beneath layers of excuses. The weather, the tire, the impossible odds. But hearing it now from his son, from the child who had survived, tore through those lies like thin paper. Emma looked between them, her throat tight. "Mr. Matthews," she said softly. "He doesn't want to hurt you. He just needs you to see it." Jonathan turned to his son. "I see it," he whispered. "I see all of it." Tommy's eyes lifted, blue and full of something raw and searching. "Then why didn't you talk about her?" He signed, the movement sharp. "Why did you pretend she was gone forever?" Jonathan pressed a trembling hand to his forehead. "Because I couldn't look at you without seeing her. I thought silence would keep the pain away. It didn't." Tommy signed. Jonathan let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "No," he said, voice breaking. "It didn't." For a long moment, neither moved. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock and the faint hiss of the rain against the windows. Then Emma stood and crossed to the desk. "You kept this," she said quietly, touching the tablet that still lay there. "You kept her voice." Jonathan nodded slowly. "I told myself it was for closure, but really I was afraid to listen." She turned the screen toward him. "Then maybe it's time." His hand hovered above the device for a long moment before he finally pressed play. The recording flickered to life. His wife appeared, her face framed by the dim interior light of the car. Her voice was faint, distorted by static, but enough remained to pierce through years of silence. "John," she said, "if you're watching this, it means I didn't get the chance to say goodbye properly. Please don't let the silence take him too. He needs to see your face, not your guilt." The screen went dark. Jonathan closed his eyes. He didn't weep, not loudly, but his shoulders shook as if the sound had been trapped inside him for years. Tommy reached out hesitantly and placed a small hand on his father's sleeve. When Jonathan looked up, the boy signed, "It's okay to talk now." Jonathan nodded, eyes wet. "Yes," he whispered. "It's time to talk." That evening, when Emma returned home, her mother was sitting by the window, a shawl around her thin shoulders. "You look different," Sarah said softly. "Lighter." Emma smiled faintly. Tommy remembered. And Mr. Matthews listened. Sarah's eyes warmed. That's the hardest part of growing. Learning to listen to pain without turning away. Emma knelt beside her, resting her head against her mother's side. Outside, the clouds were breaking, strips of late sunlight slipping through. And somewhere across town, a father and son sat in a quiet room, signing to each other for the first time in years, haltingly, imperfectly, but together. The silence that had once divided them had finally become something else. A language. Winter arrived softly that year, the kind that whispered rather than roared. Frost-painted lace along the window panes of Westfield Elementary, and the old oak on the playground stood bare and still, its leaves long gone but its roots deep, waiting. Emma Parker sat at her desk, pencil poised over a Christmas card she was making for her mother. Around her, the class buzzed with laughter and glue sticks and paper snowflakes, but she moved more slowly. Careful, thoughtful. She had learned that care was a kind of love, too. Across the room, Tommy watched her. His hearing aids, small, sleek, new, blinked faintly behind his ears. The specialists had fitted them weeks ago, and though he still preferred to sign, sometimes when the room grew quiet enough, he could hear faint echoes, the murmur of voices, the scratch of pencils, the soft rhythm of breath. When their eyes met, he smiled and raised his hands. "Your tree looks nice," Emma grinned. "Yours looks crooked." He laughed, a small sound, rough and beautiful, like the world learning to breathe again. At home, the Parker apartment was warmer now. Sarah sat up in bed more often, the color returning slowly to her face. The treatments had taken nearly everything from her, her strength, her hair, months of her life, but not her spirit. Emma climbed onto the bed and handed her the Christmas card. It was drawn in bright crayon colors, 3 figures under a tree, Emma, Tommy, and Sarah, with a 4th figure watching over them from the sky. "It's us," Emma explained softly. "And that's Tommy's mom." Sarah traced the lines with trembling fingers, her eyes shining. "It's beautiful. She was brave," Emma said. "Tommy told me she helped him be brave even when she was scared." Sarah nodded. "That's what mothers do." There was a pause, long, peaceful. Then Sarah whispered, "You've been my bravery, sweetheart." Emma hugged her tightly, feeling her mother's heart beat slow and steady beneath her thin sweater. For the first time in months, the sound didn't make her cry. That weekend, Jonathan Matthews invited them to the estate, not out of obligation but out of something quieter, humbler. The great halls that once echoed with emptiness were filled now with warmth. Pine garlands hung along the staircase, soft music played from hidden speakers, and in the center of the living room stood a Christmas tree so tall its top brushed the chandelier. Tommy tugged at his father's sleeve, signing eagerly. "Can Emma put the star?" Jonathan smiled. "Of course she can." Emma climbed onto a small stool, balancing carefully as Tommy steadied her from below. Together they lifted the glass star to the top. When it caught the light, it scattered gold across their faces, tiny reflections that shimmered like promises. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Jonathan knelt beside his son, voice gentle but sure. "You know," he said, "your mom would have loved this." Tommy nodded, his expression open, calm. "I know. She's here." Jonathan looked up at the ceiling, the corners of his mouth trembling into something like peace. He turned to Sarah then, who sat nearby with Mark. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for raising the girl who gave me my son back." Sarah's voice was soft, breathy, but strong. "Sometimes we find what we lose through someone else's love." Jonathan nodded. He didn't have the words for it. The gratitude, the grief, the strange, luminous connection that had formed between their families. But maybe words weren't needed anymore. As the evening deepened, the children sat together by the fire, sketching in a new notebook. Emma drew animals. Tommy drew hands moving in signs across the page. When they laughed, the sound and silence blended so naturally that no one could tell where one ended and the other began. Outside, snow began to fall in a slow, deliberate, like feathers. Jonathan stood by the window, watching his son's shoulders shake with laughter, listening to a sound he had once feared he'd never hear again. For the first time since the accident, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. He turned to Sarah and Mark, his voice quiet. "You're both welcome here, always." Sarah smiled, her eyes soft. Then maybe this house has finally learned to listen. Later that night, when Emma stepped outside to watch the snowfall, Tommy followed. They stood together on the steps, breath misting in the cold air. "Do you still talk to her?" Emma asked. Tommy looked up at the stars. "Every day," he signed. "She doesn't answer, but I feel her when the wind moves." Emma nodded, pulling her scarf tighter. "My mom says love doesn't end. It just changes shape." Tommy smiled faintly. "Then maybe silence is just love's other language." The wind stirred between them, carrying the soft hush of falling snow. Somewhere inside the house, a clock chimed, steady and sure. And for the first time in a long time, none of them were counting the moments that had been lost, only the ones they still had left. The world didn't change in a flash. The snow kept falling, the night stayed cold, and grief still lived quietly in their hearts. But under that same wide sky, two families, one once broken by silence, the other by sickness, began to rebuild in ways only love could explain. And in that still, silver moment, Tommy looked at Emma and signed one last thing. "Thank you for saying hello." Emma smiled. "You're welcome, Tommy." Then she lifted her small hand and signed back. "Always."